Welcome to NBA Now by Chat Sports. I am Nic Rohloff, and on today's show, we are going to break down the latest NBA rumors on Jimmy Butler because the Phoenix Suns want him, quote-unquote, bad. Plus, we'll get into Zion Williamson. He was suspended one game by the New Orleans Pelicans. Are they going to trade him ahead of the trade deadline on February 6th? Before we dive into the latest around Jimmy Butler and the NBA, I do want to make sure you are following us over on X/Twitter at Chat Sports. That is the handle. We are putting out daily content, short form posts, retweets, highlights, whether it's the NBA, college football, NFL. We will have you covered on everything you need to know in the sports world with daily and multiple posts. So go give us a follow on X at Chat Sports. All right, we'll start with the Phoenix Suns and Jimmy Butler because NBA insider Mark Stein reported that the Phoenix Suns want him bad. But the Bradley Beal contract still remains an obstacle in any potential deal that involves the Phoenix Suns and Jimmy Butler. Because if you go back and you are watching this video and learning about the Jimmy Butler stuff for the first time, well, let me fill you in on some background information. Well, one, I'll say this. I don't think a trade happens between Jimmy Butler, the Miami Heat, and the Phoenix Suns. Why? Well, it's because of that Beal contract. Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant are all making max money for Phoenix. They're in the second apron. Jimmy Butler is making max money for the Miami Heat. Because the Suns are in the second apron, they cannot aggregate contracts in a trade, which means one of Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, or Bradley Beal has to leave the roster in order for them to acquire Jimmy Butler. Issue: the Miami Heat do not want Bradley Beal in a trade from the Phoenix Suns. And Phoenix isn't going to trade KD or Book to get Jimmy Butler. So there's a three-team trade that would have to happen. And I personally do not see a third team really jumping in to take on the Bradley Beal contract. Beal, who has a no-trade clause, waiving it to go to that team, and everyone singing Kumbaya in happiness that a trade that actually happened. But maybe that's actually not the case. That's my personal belief. But Eddie Gonzalez, who covers the Suns and the NBA, I'll say this. The Suns have found a few third teams and fourth teams for Beal. But do the Heat want Colin Sexton and John Collins? Do they want Chris Middleton and Bobby Portis? Maybe Zach LaVine is floating out there. This is one of those things where if Miami wanted LaVine, that deal would have been done a week ago. So that's my thing. Maybe there is a team out there that is willing to take on Bradley Beal's $50 million contract, that no-trade clause, and take him into their roster. And maybe Beal's okay with having that no-trade clause get waived for this specific trade. But my biggest thing is, when you look at this, there has to be four sides to this deal. The Suns have to agree to a trade. Bradley Beal has to agree to the trade. The third team has to agree to the trade to take on Beal. And then the Miami Heat have to be okay with what they're getting back in return. But when you think about that third team taking on Bradley Beal's contract, they're likely going to want some draft capital to take on that Beal contract. Phoenix has 2 second-rounders and 1 first-round pick they can trade. But if Miami's trading Butler and they're just getting expiring veteran contracts, they're going to want draft capital. Feels like there's not enough draft capital to be traded all around here, and I don't think there's any expiring contracts and veteran players that Miami would welcome onto their roster, which makes this a very unlikely trade. But cast your vote. Let me know. Will Jimmy Butler be traded before the NBA trade deadline? He still wants to be dealt. I think teams are still trying to figure out what his interest is in them, in the Heat getting rid of Butler. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Type Y for yes or type N for no. I will say this. The trade deadline this year in 2025 is February 6th. We are less than a month away from that date passing. And it seems like every single day that goes by, it's more and more likely that Jimmy Butler will not be traded. And I just don't see anything materializing considering Jimmy is alienating almost every team in the NBA and only wants to go to Phoenix. I don't think the Suns and Heat in this third team are going to make anything happen. And it's being widely reported that the Miami Heat are planning to bring him back to the team after the 7-game suspension that the Heat imposed on Jimmy Butler runs out. And they are comfortable doing that. And by the way, when does that 7-game suspension end? Oh, yeah. It ends on Wednesday when they take the Los Angeles Lakers on, which means he is eligible to return on January 17th, this upcoming Friday. And the Heat, I think, are going to bring him back. I think this is an ultimate disaster by the Miami Heat. The Heat have won 3 in a row at the time of filming this. Yes, against not so good teams, Warriors, Jazz, Blazers, but they're 20-17. It's not like they're a better team without Jimmy, but bringing Butler back into that locker room, back into that culture, is kind of going to make things messy, hinder the development of a Jaime Jaquez Jr. Nikola Jovic. I actually can't comprehend Miami being okay on doing this. I am unbelievably intrigued to see how this plays out. And we'll talk about Zion Williamson coming up here in just a second, but we are sponsored by Prize Picks, the #1 daily fantasy sports platform. And if you want to play Prize Picks, get started today. It's so easy to play. All you do is pick more or less on 2 or more player stat projections, and you can win up to 1,000 times your cash right now. And with the basketball season heating up, Prize Picks is the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts, like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Think Steph Curry will get more than 5 3-pointers, Giannis for more than 35 points. Cook up your hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. And I play Prize Picks on a daily basis. And one of the reasons why I love playing Prize Picks the most is the different ways you can play. You can combine different sports, basketball, football, hockey. You can go professional. You can go college. You can do it everything that you possibly want on Prize Picks. And I do have an entry for the national championship game in collegiate football. I've got the more than on Will Howard, less than on Riley Leonard, and the less than on Jeremiah Smith as well. I like these 3-player entries here. Take advantage of that free entry that Prize Picks is offering you with the Will Howard passing yards right now. And make sure you download the app and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. One more time, download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, let's transfer it over to Zion Williamson and the New Orleans Pelicans, because is he on the way out of that organization right now? The Pelicans have been an absolute disaster this season. They have not performed to expectations after they made the blockbuster trade in the offseason, acquiring DeJounte Murray from the Atlanta Hawks. And Zion Williamson has not been able to stay on the court at all. Brandon Ingram hasn't been able to, and they really have never got this core together to play. And now Herb Jones even has an injury. Well, if you take it back a week or so, Zion Williamson actually got suspended by the New Orleans Pelicans, being late to team meetings, being late to practices, to the team's flight to Philadelphia. All of these incidents are the reason why he was ultimately suspended for 1 game. Zion's also missed a ton of time this year with injury, and he's ultimately only played 8 games all season long. And then when you factor in the fact that Stephen A. Smith saying that Zion Williamson, quote unquote, doesn't want to be there, referring to the Pelicans, you wonder if a trade will actually materialize. Suspension, the fact that he can never stay on the court, not wanting to be there. And then you also have other reports suggesting there could be a trade for Zion Williamson in the past. You have to ask, well, Brian Windhorst kind of shut this down over the last 2 or 3 days. The ESPN insider said there is no sense that the New Orleans Pelicans are looking to move on from Zion Williamson before the NBA trade deadline on February 6th. And it's kind of interesting because there's multiple reports that they're looking to move off Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson, maybe just reset. They're even open to a trade of CJ McCollum. There's a lot going down on in New Orleans, and we will have to see where this ultimately goes as we get closer and closer to the NBA trade deadline. Which is why you need to be subscribed to the channel, because we are putting out weekly NBA rumors and videos on the trade rumors, on the trade deadline. We'll be live on NBA trade deadline as well. Make sure you hit that sub button. Lock us in here at Chat Sports, not only for college football, NFL, MLB, and content across the entire sports world, but because of us having you covered on everything surrounding the NBA. All right, let's talk about Zion Williamson more in depth here because, like I mentioned, he's only played in 8 games this season, suspension, injury. His numbers are about the same as they always are. Maybe efficiency is a little bit down, but the main issue that Zion has always had is just being available. And they say best ability is availability. Well, he didn't play in 21-22 due to injury. Only played 29 games the following season. did put together a full season last year for New Orleans, which made everyone think, okay, is he heading in the right direction? Is he going to be a building block? And that number one pick expectations and hype, he's going to live up to that. Well, he's reverting right back to his old self of not being able to stay on the floor. And with all that being said, though, I still doubt that he gets traded before the deadline. Could a trade for Zion Williamson occur in the offseason? There is no doubt in my mind that that could happen. But for me to really expect the team to pick up the phone, trade for Zion Williamson in the next 3 to 4 weeks, I just don't see that happening. Feels a really far-fetched idea that that's all going to come in motion right now. But when you think of really what could happen with New Orleans, it feels like it's more likely that this man right here, Brandon Ingram, gets traded. When you think of someone who could be dealt away from New Orleans, it's 1,000% more likely to be Brandon Ingram. Ingram is in the last year of his contract. He's going to be a free agent this upcoming offseason. And him and New Orleans have tabled extension discussions and talks, which means he's going to hit the open market. And it's been widely reported that the Pelicans' top priority before that deadline in February 6th is going to trade Brandon Ingram. So to me, I think we should be talking about him getting dealt way more than Zion Williamson. And we'll talk more about Ingram here in just a second, but let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Who is more likely to be dealt away from New Orleans? If it's Zion Williamson, in your opinion, type those ZWs. If you ultimately think it is the wing, Brandon Ingram, get those BIs down in the comment section. Like I just told you, I think it's going to be a Brandon Ingram trade without a question because he is not going to sign long-term. The Pelicans don't want to give him $50 million per season over 4 years. That's what it's reported that Brandon Ingram wants. Now, personally, I wouldn't give him that either because I don't think his game translates to winning, and I don't think he could be a top 2 on a championship contending team. And if you can't be a top 2 guy on a championship team, then you should not be getting paid $50 million, in my opinion, especially with these new CBA guidelines. I think he should be getting paid a lot more closer to that OG Anunoby range, $40 to $43 million per season. I think if the Brandon Ingram camp told New Orleans, hey, we'd sign 4 for 165. We'll do 4 for 168. I think this would be done by now. But ultimately, that does not seem like it's going to happen. He wants $50 million per year. He wants to reach that $200 million threshold. So I think he's going to be in for agency. But there's not really many teams that can offer him that type of contract in free agency. So this is going to be an interesting situation to watch down the stretch. And it's also going to be a fun team to watch, New Orleans. I'm not talking about them as a fun team to watch on the basketball court. I'm more or less talking in the trade market. Are they going to trade Herb Jones? The injury might provide a little bit of a stop on that. Are they going to move off C.J. McCollum? Are they going to try to recoup some of those assets they traded away to Atlanta for DeJounte Murray by moving off Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson? New Orleans is the number one team that I've got my eyes on before that February 6th trade deadline. We can talk and look at the Jimmy Butler and Phoenix Suns saga all we want. But to me, it is all about those Pelicans. What players do they keep? What players do they move off of? It'll be fascinating to watch, which is why you need to subscribe to the channel because we're dropping daily content here at Chat Sports, and we'll have you covered on everything happening inside the NBA leading up to that trade deadline on February 6th. I'm Nic Rohloff. Join the channel because we'll have you covered on everything you need to know.